November 28th, Dragonflight is going to be launching, and for you raiders out there, that means it's going to be a very, very festive raid experience. So let's have a little look at how Dragonflight is faring so far. There's a lot to unpack here, but I'll keep it pretty brief and we'll talk about some things. Dragonflight is on its way. Along with that, they're going to make one change, which was suggested in an interview with Liquid Max by Ian, is that they're going to be releasing Season 1 on December 12th. That means you have those couple of weeks to level up, do the story, explore, gather all the pets and things you want to do, and get yourself prepared before the gearing treadmill begins. They're going to be releasing normal, heroic, and mythic at the exact same time. That's quite a departure from how they've run things in the last few years. Obviously, part of this is that they did not want the Mythic Raid to launch literally the week before Christmas and have all that involved, like they did with Side and Athreus and all that kind of stuff, with people raiding Christmas Day. They wanted it to be a little bit earlier. This feels like they intended it to come out here. A lot of people are going to feel this is pretty rushed, and there is some speculation that it's still being rushed a little bit. We'll talk about that. But in terms of how internally they wanted the game to come out, this is exactly when they wanted it to come out. They've had this date in mind for a pretty long time. They may have had 1 week earlier as the design choice, but 1 week after is okay as well. What they absolutely did not want is a repeat of Shadowlands, where they were like, it's just not ready. The game is broken. And there are still some things that are broken with Dragonflight, but they're expecting to be able to get it fixed up there rather than have people book holidays. This was a huge problem in Shadowlands, and you might remember it, where people book their vacation for a big expansion launch. This is their holiday. They want to spend time, they want to chill out, they want to play with all their friends. Everybody else is taking time off, so they want to get in and do the best they can, and then suddenly the game date gets changed, and people have just got a wasted experience and are very angry and very furious. They do not want a repeat of that. So I think we should be confident that it is going to come out here and no delays will happen. So, let's talk about Dragonflight in general. I've done a number of videos on it from the alpha. I haven't done anything in the last couple of weeks because, frankly, they haven't really added much since then. I'm still waiting for the end game stuff. So, we have no Mythic Plus yet. Blizzard have been in direct contact with me several times and like, hey, what do you think of our new dungeons? I'm like, it's hard to tell. Simply put, it's really hard to tell because normal and heroic die pretty quickly. When I played last week, it was very noticeable that they had bumped up the difficulty of heroic. In the first versions of heroic, they were just complete walkovers. You could kill the bosses before they did any mechanics whatsoever. They just shredded. Now they do some mechanics. They're a lot more fun and interesting in that regard. Still nothing of a challenge where you're like actually thinking about what the boss does. You can still play every single heroic with just reaction, which I think is a good place to be. For the people who want to farm heroic, where heroic is where they're going to do some learning, where heroic is going to be where they spend most of their time, being able to play reactively rather than having some sort of set game plan of who has to be where, who's going to deal with X and Y, is totally fine. I think that's totally fine. One thing I very much enjoyed is the variety of the dungeons. Blizzard has gone a totally different direction to other games, namely Final Fantasy XIV, which is extraordinarily formulaic in terms of how it designs the base dungeon, because their dungeons are based so much on spectacle and so much on storytelling. They can do that and it's fine. World of Warcraft is not like that, and they're embracing that fully. In fact, Dragonflight is embracing a lot of things that they haven't done in a long time. But dungeons is one that they're like, we've got some dungeons that are about 10 minutes long, we've got some dungeons that are about 20, 30 minutes long. They're all varied, they're all mixed up, and hopefully they give good reason to utilize all of them, and we don't end up in a more of Souls type situation where it's like everybody just floods to the really short one just to get it done. Certainly if there's some sort of end of dungeon bonus that you're gonna get, something along those lines would be a little bit but hopefully they've thought about that in some way. I haven't seen what it is yet, but we'll get there. Raid testing started today. So as I'm recording this, raid testing just started, and they have a very tightly packed schedule. This worries me a little bit. Traditionally, raid testing takes a month or so, with them revisiting bosses that are completely broken and going back and double checking them. I've raid tested since the Burning Crusade, so I've got my legs in there of how long I've raid tested for. I will be raid testing this raid on Monday on the stream. We'll be doing the normal mode because obviously I don't have an active guild right now. But this is a little shocking how densely packed they are on the raid testing. However, after what they did with Sepulchre, which is a ropey example considering how difficult Sepulchre was, They are capable of putting together really good bosses without public raid testing. They've proven that with the last 3 that were in Sepulchre. They were really good bosses. Extremely hard, but good and solid bosses for the most part. So it might be a case if they don't need much testing, or they've got a better internal testing system that they've put in place, and they can actually just get a little bit of a feeler for what's going on. In terms of the raid testing right now, I guess we should talk about the counterpoints as well, so this isn't like a gushy video. It's not how I feel. There's still classes that are very, very bugged, very, very broken, which brings us to the features. Features is something I think people are going to be a little wary of coming into Dragonflight, which is not necessarily a bad thing. There aren't a lot of features. There really aren't. Dragonflight, for me, in like not a conclusion, but a general feeling, is like a hard reset on World of Warcraft. That's how it feels to me. Dragonflight is a really, really good foundation to then build an MMO off. And I say that because they have stripped away, they have kept to their word, a lot of the nonsense that drove players like me away. That's gone. I would almost say, at this point, with a general play around in Dragonflight, that Dragonflight feels like it's more drop in, drop out than I've ever seen World of Warcraft before, rather than really trying to put in 100 different treadmills to keep you chasing the carrot all the time. This time around, they seem to be a little bit more accepting of what I would consider modern era MMOs, is that the market, in terms of the video games market, is so vastly flooded with choice and options, especially ones that don't cost you anything, or that you can get a tremendous amount of playtime out for free, that trying to create a game that's like, you must play every day, or you will be missing something, or you must be playing 3 to 4 times a week. And if you're logging in, you must have a laundry list of things to do. That's the main reason I left, right? Was that it disrespecting my time is what I felt it was. There's just so much experience and so many games out there. I know there are people who want to play World of Warcraft all day, every day. Sure. But more and more people are opening their eyes to the fact that, well, I could just go and play this, this, and this, and this, and this with my friends and have a good experience. And I want to have a good quality experience when I come into World of Warcraft. Whether or not you determine coming in and farming more souls and doing all that kind of stuff and farming reagents, materials, and things like that just to keep your player power up, is quality gaming experience is going to vary. For me, it was absolutely bottom of the barrel. It's not what I wanted to do. I want to choose what I want to do with my time and chase something that I think is worthwhile, and that might not necessarily involve player power at all. So having that choice is where Dragonflight is going. I see this as a good thing. I see this as a very good thing where they're embracing the fact that we just don't need to abuse the player's time. A subscription for a month for somebody who logs in just to do whatever there is they want to do. So if you want to log in and do a day of Mythic Plus, a day of leveling alts, a day of doing, just want to be a raid logger, or you want to spend all day there, is exactly worth the same. As long as we give those players the options, instead of forcing them to take part in all these other different things that they have absolutely no interest in. So I see this as a generally good thing. So coming back to features then, obviously the primary feature is dragonflying. Now, I will say straight off the bat, dragonflying is really fun. It is super fun. And what they've done with it so far, again, baseline, this is all stuff in Dragonflight, and I want to take this message through to the end of the video, is nearly everything I talk about now needs iterating upon and building upon. But Dragonflying is really, really fun. The basic stuff they've got in, the Dragonflight speed challenges, super good, especially the hard modes where you have to come up with your own methods, your own techniques in order to beat those things, is fantastic. The races, which take place amongst multiple people that you have to actually queue up for, and then they'll get an actual race going. Done a little bit of it. Really, really fun as well, especially when you start getting a little bit of competition. There's a stress and an intensity of who's chasing you, who's going where, are you winning, are you behind, how close is the competition, can I catch up, I know how to do these turns better, how much do I know the course, and I think people are going to have a really good time with that in a casual basis. I think that's something people will want to do. But that is really the main feature. The other feature we could talk about is, of course, the talent trees. Now, this is something that's not finished. As I said, very clear on raid testing is that a lot of classes are broken. A lot of their talent trees just weren't working. There are some spells that are just simply not implemented yet. And Blizzard has released a post saying they're kind of almost done with it and they're moving into the tuning phase. So if you're new to like a pre-launch of an expansion, they have the bit where they throw all the spells in. That's where we've been for the last couple of months. They throw all the spells in, they throw their basic ideas in, and that's where it's all nebulous. It's subject to change. Players come back and say, hey, this talent tree is just not very interesting, or this talent tree just pushes me to one build. that's not very fun. The idea with your talent trees, as you've seen from the designs, is that I should be able to like mix and match. I should be able to go down like to the left and then through the middle and then to the right, or it's all left, all right, or down the middle to the left. I should be able to do that to pick and choose my spells and abilities that make sense for the content I'm taking part in. And a lot of them sometimes just end up with like, well, this is kind of the all left build and that's it. And if I want to go the other way, it's all right. And then it comes down to a numbers game of which one is better. So that part is over for like most of it. Obviously, they're going to get the spells that are broken working, but now they're in the tuning phase, which is where you actually figure out how much damage this character should do. Right? So you might have seen, in fact, I've not checked because I'm not in that world as much anymore, but I imagine there's been a ton of videos about X is overpowered, ranking the best DPS and all that. Absolute fucking nonsense, absolute garbage. They don't start tuning the classes until just before the game comes out, which is where they're tweaking. That stuff is useful for feedback to Blizzard, but they're also tracking it themselves. It's one of the things they do with raid testing. It's like, how much damage are specs doing once we actually put them in a raid environment? How much are they doing so we can start to do our best to get it close? They've never quite got it right, that's to be sure. But during their post, they did specifically say, it's like, look, the talent trees are a whole new thing. We know for a fact, and I really appreciate this, we know for a fact that some of you out there are going to come up with some absolutely absurd build that shouldn't make any sense and actually does ludicrous amounts of damage, or some specs are just going to do trash damage, and it's going to be an ongoing process throughout the expansion, and probably forevermore, is to keep tweaking and turning the dials and make things work. Unlike Shadowlands, where we had all the essences and fucking renown rewards and nonsense and legendaries and all that, where they were like, their initial impression, if you might remember, Shadowlands was, hey, we're going to implement like 5 different systems to sort your character out, and that means we can individually tweak each little bit and sort it out with, depending on which covenant and which follower you have with you and all this kind of stuff. And having all these little tweaking knobs, like they seem to set up a thing like a huge DJ, right? Who was like, had all those mixer boards with little dials and shit like that. So they were like, oh, okay, eventually we'll get the right sound. And it kind of worked out towards the very end. Again, the 0.3 patch curse of World of Warcraft was a thing. But ultimately, this time around, they just have one mixing board, which is the talent trees, and they can do it much easier. It's like, okay, so Shadowburn or whatever for Warlocks is just doing way, way, way too much damage. We can twist that here. Oh, this spell is doing too much damage. All right, we can twist that within the talent tree and make that work. And just nerf the damage or buff the damage, ideally, to make it work. Some classes are definitely not working right, though. I did see Public Shadow Priest Expert was like, this is not good for Shadow Priest right now. I played around with Shadow Priest a bit, but a lot of the spells weren't implemented, so it's like, how much testing can you really do? Not much, ultimately. But it'll be ongoing. The new profession system so far, I stand by what I said in my first review of the profession system. I had another look at it last night. It is purely a social system. The profession system is the new profession system. If you're not sure, they've overhauled it, but it's very much the same. It's just got a lot more stuff to it, so you can specialize a little bit, but it's not super deep. Don't expect some, like, truly, like, you know, really challenging investment to go into it. Ultimately, you can do a lot with it as time goes on. But what you can do is get the social element out of it, which is what I believe the profession system is really for, this overhaul, as you will be looking towards specific players in order to craft certain things, which is great. I actually fully support this. I'm not disappointed in the profession system at all. I actually encourage this. Anything that could put the social back into WoW so that players aren't just a class color anymore would be great. And the profession system is a good way of getting people back to recognizing you're not warrior, you're not rogue, you're not paladin, you are preach, you know, you are nups, you are Chris, you are whoever. So you can actually find specific people, and people will gain a certain status and renown themselves on your servers for people you want to be crafting your boots and your legs. I trust this guy. Building trust. It was a very good thing in Classic, and those of you who've been playing Classic will know of trustworthy people that you went to if you're in Chance or whatever. It might have been friends, probably, because it's revamped Classic where people like, well, I know what I need. But in general, for the Pug world, you started to learn who was trustworthy, who you could deal with, and certainly in the days of trading mats away. That was kind of interesting. But on features, that's kind of it. The other feature we could talk about is the Elemental Storms. Now, this was very concerning. You might remember my last video if you saw it. The Elemental Storms are these events that happen. We will talk about Renown in a second. That were just mob grinds. That's all they are. But gave you very, very powerful gear pretty quickly. They have since come out and said this is the catch-up system. They already have in place what the catch-up system will be for Season 1 of Dragonflight, and it is the Elemental Storms, that makes a lot of sense. Because based on the gear that was dropping in, like, Heroics, it made no sense to do dungeons at all. It was one of our concerns in our last videos. They've now said this is the catch-up system, and it's not going to be there at launch. So the Elemental Storms footage that we've shown you, and probably show you here a little bit, is not going to be there at launch. It's going to come a little bit later, and it's a case of very quickly gearing up your characters via catch-up. You'll just go and grind some mobs. You can do it in a couple of hours, and you'll walk away with some very high-level gear that will get you straight up to raiding and stuff. So really nice for alts. So get an alt group together, shoot down there. I imagine this will turn into similar to Warlords of Draenor, which is where you could turn up in an area where an event was happening, and there'd be a 40-man crew just rocking around, killing everything, and you just be like, join, get out, whenever you have some free time. It's a shame they're not more interesting than just a straight mob grind. There was the opportunity, we talked about that in our previous video, of making these really, really fun. It just turned out to be a purely coincidental situation that one of the Elemental Storms take place in an area which has outdoor Torghast powers, and the other ones do not. But they will have world bosses and things like that associated to them. So it should be an interesting period of time anyway for the catch-up period. A little talk on Renown then. No real changes there. My complaints still stand is that the Renown system with the 4 new factions looks very interesting and looks really fun. It does. It looks... I'm not going to change that. I've done a little bit of it. I still stand by the fact that world quests are the way to progress this. Is just torture for me personally. People don't, I had a lot of feedback on this. It's like, I don't mind world quests. Great, that's fine. That's absolutely no issue. I actually don't hate world quests when they serve a different purpose. They don't relate to this type of content. All I was, my feedback was, if you watched the video, was that I would love the unlocking of the Renown system with these 4 factions to be more directly correlated to the factions themselves, utilizing the features and things that they unlock. But they're going to stay as they are, which is a real shame because I wanted to test this a lot more, genuinely, but I can't bring myself to do world quests anymore. Not since Legion kind of sucked my soul out of that, and BFA made no friends out of that, and then Shadowlands didn't make it any better. So that's where I'm at with the Renown. Really interesting system. I would like to know more about it. It could be crap. I don't know. I'm just refusing to go down that rabbit hole. It's not something I'm going to do. So that's where I'm at. I think my conclusion right now, let's do a little conclusion on this. As Dragonflight stands right now, a lot of the stuff I really want to know about is not there yet. We've had 1 raid boss and no Mythic Plus in the game yet. So everything is kind of outdoorsy and casual. I do feel like the casual gameplay is going to be a little too weak at start. I'll be interested to see what the casual player base thinks, who isn't interested. By casual, again, everyone has a different meaning for that phrase. I'm talking about players who aren't particularly interested in raiding, aren't particularly interested in doing Mythic Plus beyond a certain level, but beyond getting their like weekly vault, and probably doing a lower level one. Aren't interested in pushing high arena, aren't interested in doing fucking rated battlegrounds all the time. You know, those guys who just want to log in and just have a fun experience. I have general concerns that your choices are really going to be limited to like doing world quests and then going along with the Renown. And for some people, in fact, maybe for a lot of people, that will be absolutely fine. I'll log in, I'll do my world quest just as I have done for the last 4 expansions, and that will unlock more content for me to do with these factions. If you're not into that, though, maybe professions are going to be there for you to focus on, and it could work out fine. It feels like outside, like for me personally, I can, instead of trying to put myself in other people's shoes, I'll talk about it as if it was me. I'm not sure what I would do. And I felt like that a couple of times logging in is like, what should I do? And I generally get left with, do dungeons. Okay. And that's kind of it. That's kind of where I felt with what instead I haven't really found, and that's to say, oh well, look, Mike, I'm sure somebody like Mike. That's why, you know, having mandatory chores and things to do is really fun. No, it's more a case of I don't really have anything to point my arrow at and say, right, I'm going to work on this today, and I'm going to focus on that. That's something interesting, which I would do in other games. It's like I want to focus on this today. I want to focus on that tomorrow. I want to get together and go and do this thing. There's not much of that, if any. It's really a case of, okay, I don't want to do world quests, so that leaves me with very little, ultimately. That's how it feels at the start. So it'll be interesting to see how other people react to that, or whether that gets any modification in the next month or so before the game comes out. All right, so that's how I feel about it right now, and we'll keep you updated. When Mythic Plus comes and we start to get a look at how good these dungeons are, that's something I'm very excited for, and I'll do some raid testing on Monday, and I'll have some feedback for you on how the raid feels, because that's going to be important. All right, so I'll see you again. Bye, guys.